Our next senator, Senator Bayh, followed by Senator Chambliss, Senator Clinton, and Senator Pryor, and Senator Dayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and in addition to that, for serving our country. These are difficult times, and your service is not without some personal cost. I am going to assume some facts up here and then ask what I think may be two somewhat difficult questions. I assume that you serve at the pleasure of the President. I assume that he sets a policy for our national security and in general and for Iraq in particular. And I assume that he is engaged in overseeing the implementation of those policies and, like you, accepts responsibility for that implementation. This is a long way of saying, as Senator Byrd mentioned, that in our system we have a tradition of the buck stopping at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And as we're all aware, we're now engaged in a debate about who the occupant of that residence will be come next January. So in many respects, I view this as a question of presidential leadership. How does he react? How aggressively? Does he try and minimize the situation, or does he try and take dramatic steps to address the magnitude of the problem? As has been noted, he has apologized for what took place. And as all of you have indicated, particularly you, Mr. Secretary, the criminal process will move forward. That is a hallmark of our system of justice. One of the questions that's overhanging this proceeding today and the situation in general is that enough? And so the difficult question I'd like to ask is to follow up on the question from Senator Graham. Mr. Secretary, I could tell that you struggled in answering his question, that this is something that's been on your mind. Your resignation has been called for. That's a pretty serious thing for any of us. And you answered that if you ever concluded that you could not be effective in discharging your duties, you would step down, but that you would not do so as a part of a political witch hunt, so to speak. There's another aspect of this, though, I'd like to ask your opinion about, and that is whether, in your opinion, and I know it's ultimately a decision for the President to make, but in your opinion, even though you weren't personally involved in the underlying acts here, would it serve to demonstrate how seriously we take this situation, and therefore help to undo some of the damage to our reputation if you were to step down?
That's possible.
I appreciate your candor. My second question has to do with some comments that Senator Lieberman made, and I would like to associate myself with what I thought were very appropriate and moving comments by Senator Lieberman. I believe very strongly that our cause, and these are not words I use frequently, but that our cause is morally superior to our adversaries, both the terrorists we fight and those who now seek to undo the future of a free Iraq. There is growing concern by the supporters of this cause that this situation that we're inquiring into today is part of a broader problem, that the effort may be bogging down, that we may be approaching a tipping point, that momentum needs to be regained if we're going to prevail. I'd like to just read a couple of sentences from a column in yesterday's New York Times by Tom Friedman, who supported this endeavor in Iraq. He says, "We are in danger of losing something much more important than just this war in Iraq. We are in danger in losing America as an instrument of moral authority and inspiration in the world. This administration needs to undertake a total overhaul of its Iraq policy. Otherwise, it is courting a total disaster for us all." And he goes on to say how he hopes that such an overhaul can be undertaken because we need to prevail in Iraq. So my question, Mr. Secretary, my final question is just very simply, do you believe we're on the right course presently? Or is dramatic action necessary to regain the momentum so that we can ultimately prevail in what is a very noble and idealistic undertaking?
I do believe we're on the right track. It's a tough road. It's a bumpy road. It's always been bumpy, going from a vicious dictatorship to something approximating a representative government that's respectful of its different varied religious and ethnic groups. That's not an easy path. I am convinced that we are doing exactly what ought to be done, and that is to pass responsibility for that country to the Iraqis. I'm convinced we're doing exactly what ought to be done in recognizing that they need to have the ability to provide for their own security, which is why so much effort's gone into developing police and civil defense corps and an army and border patrols and site protection people. We do not want they do not want Americans or coalition forces in their country over a prolonged period, and goodness knows we don't want to be there. And the only proper way to pass it off is if they have their own security forces, which is why we're spending the money and making the effort. It's why General Abizaid and General Sanchez and General Petraeus now are over there working that problem. And I think that we've got a crack at doing it. I don't think it'll be smooth. I think it'll be rough. It'll be bumpy. But if you don't take your hand off the bicycle seat, you're not going to be able to ride the bike. And we've got to do that. And we're going to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Senator Bayh.